Game on. It is looking more and more likely that Republicans, they are headed for a contested convention. And Donald Trump, he's hired a top expert to help him with the inevitable floor fight. Cleveland, it will rock in July. Bernie Sanders running like he's in it to win it. We're going to show you how he's going after Hillary. The gloves completely off, and then we'll debate whether or not it's actually working. And the financial crisis in Atlantic City isn't just crippling the city's government. Small business owners on the boardwalk, they're also feeling the pinch. We are on the ground in AC, seeing how the people are coping. Evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Donald Trump, he is preparing to battle. Nothing new here, except this one has to do with math. He has hired a top Republican strategist to handle delegate wrangling. Now, that man, Paul Manafort. He managed the convention floor for Gerald Ford in '76. That the last time, not too coincidentally, a convention was in fact contested. It's also looking like Trump will need all the help he can get. Political reporting now that 90% of insiders and experts it has spoken with, they expect this thing will go to a contested convention. And the vast majority of those people say neither Trump nor Cruz will in fact get to the nomination on the first ballot. Now that could open up the door for a guy like this guy, Paul Ryan. Now, even though the House Speaker keeps speaking about not being interested, his office did just release this pretty gauzy campaign-style video.
What really bothers me the most of politics these days is this notion of identity politics, that we're going to win an election by dividing people, rather than inspiring people on our common humanity and our common ideals and our common culture, on the things that should unify us.
Okay, now there was a denial right after it, but nonetheless here, sure sounded like somebody who says, I'm your guy to fix the problem. Let's bring in our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman. He's going to spell out what a contested convention, if I could spit it out, would look like here.
You got plenty of time to say between now and July.
You and I, there's not too bigger fans of West Wing than the two of us. We could have gone from a clip, but, you know, this is getting stranger than fiction.
If you're playing at home, season 6 of The West Wing features the contested convention. And the first step in a contested convention, Rich, is that no candidate begins the convention with a majority of delegates. And in 2016, that means Donald Trump. Trump can still avoid a contested convention, but he needs to win 495 of the remaining 882 delegates. That means he needs to win 56% of them between now and Cleveland. That's difficult, but not impossible. But let's say Trump doesn't get to that magic number of 1237 in delegates before the convention. What happens then? Well, the rules vary widely state by state, but the upshot is on the first ballot, 95% of the delegates in Cleveland must vote for the candidate they were selected to represent. If you're a Trump delegate, you got to vote for Trump. Same with everyone else. But 5% of the delegates will be free to vote for whomever they want. So if no one gets to 1237 votes on the first ballot, you go to a second ballot. At that point, the majority of the delegates, 59% of them, are free to vote for anybody. Trump, Cruz, Kasich, Paul Ryan, Mitt Romney, Ted Nugent, Glenn Beck, Elmo, anybody. The rest are still bound to support their original candidate. Now, that could be enough to put someone over the top, but if not, you go to a third ballot where 80% of the delegates become free agents. And the process just keeps going with more and more delegates unbound from their original candidates. But of course, it's not quite that simple because the GOP seems to have made up rules solely designed to give me a migraine. Take, for example, the delegates of Marco Rubio and Ben Carson. They have 178 delegates between them, and those delegates could be critical. Rubio hasn't said anything about his delegates and what he wants them to do. Carson has released his, but state party rules might not let those delegates vote for anybody but Rubio and Carson on the first ballot, and maybe even after that. Also, delegate numbers can change as state parties pick their actual delegates. Think about Ted Cruz's post-primary gains in Louisiana. And then also consider who picks the delegates. In California, delegates are chosen by voters specifically to represent candidates. In New York, the state party picks delegates, so they might be less loyal to one candidate, think Trump, than other delegates. That could be a game changer on a second or a third ballot, Rich.
Let's bring in our panel right now. Dominic Carr, political journalist and author, who's been in the field, if you will, here at Trump rallies and more, and Sanders and the rest, and Republican strategist Bill O'Reilly, or as we call him, the good one, and Andrew Whitman, of course, our senior political correspondent. Listen, it was great parlor games, Bill, to talk about this. Oh, what if there's a contested convention? I swear I thought Andrew wanted just to see, a floor fight here in person. But now it would be a huge surprise if anybody, and really only realistic, Trump gets to the 1237. But the more folks I talk to say, fine, even if he comes up short, it is going to be worse. The worst outcome could be if they take it away from him when they get here. Now, there's not consensus on this, and I have a feeling you don't agree, but imagine if they went for someone outside of Trump and Cruz. What do you then say to the electorate?
Yeah, I don't think they can do that, but I agree that the process doesn't stop at Cleveland. It continues at Cleveland. If you don't have 1237, there are rules in place for everybody, same rules for everybody, that you go until you get that 1237. So
let me just say this. Like in everything, Bill, you're right. No one, for a second, is going to spend a second tonight debating with you that the letter of the rule is what you say.
That's right.
But there's also a spirit of the rule.
Yeah.
And the expectation for the person who doesn't follow us, like the four of us at this table tonight, is, okay, there's a magic number you got to hit. But if you don't hit it, you work something out in Cleveland. But the leader in the clubhouse, especially when he started out with 17 guys to start this thing, he's probably going to walk away with the thing. Or if not him, at least the guy in second place. If a Kasich or a Ryan or somebody else walks away, it sure feels that somebody's rigging the system.
Yeah, I mean, unbeknownst to most of the Trump supporters especially, the Republican Party is not that top down. Now, you might say the Senate's top down or the House is top down. The party itself is not. It's much more complicated
Explain
than
top down,
that.
what you mean.
Top down meaning the bosses at the top saying this is what's going to happen. It doesn't really work that way.
It'd be nice if it did.
It'd be much easier if they did. But I think what happens is they all go in. I agree. I don't think Trump hits the 1237. And then they go to the second and maybe a third ballot. And I think that's where Cruz dominates. I think Cruz ends up being, I mean, if I had to guess, I'd say Cruz is going to be the nominee.
And you say that because he's been lobbying the delegates?
He's better at it. Yeah, he's been lobbying the delegates from the beginning. The Trump people did not really know what they were doing. There weren't real political pros. They're bringing in a team that's a little bit late coming to the game. I think right now Cruz is the odds-on favorite.
Just to be fair, put a face in this for a second. When people hear the word delegate, okay? We talked to Stephanie Miners, a super delegate in New York. She's a mayor of Syracuse, sophisticated in terms of what's going on. But delegates are not, for an individual delegate, without putting a name or a face in the person, talk about how it works when somebody goes and says, is there horse trading going on? Hey, come over to my side. I'll make sure that X happens. What happens behind closed doors?
Yeah, basically that's right. I mean, I know New York delegates for Trump, and I'm really not trying to disparage Trump here. I know I do that. But I know New York delegates for Trump, who will be delegates for Trump, that already are saying privately, we're off Trump after the first ballot. I mean, definitely. They haven't decided Kasich or Cruz. It's going to be Cruz, I assume. But that support is very, very thin.
And that's an individual choice? I know it is by letter, but is it a group or an individual?
Sometimes a group, sometimes an individual. Sometimes an entire delegation will come over, where Arkansas will say, you know what, we've got to deal with, and sometimes it comes down to who's going to be Secretary of State or who's going to be at Treasury and who's going to be the ambassador to Guam. I mean, you get stuff like that going on. I don't know if Guam needs an ambassador, but you know, some of that horse trading goes on behind the scenes.
Now, to that end, Dom, and I'll get to Andrew will be there in a second, but do you imagine he's going to file 40 packages a day. Do you imagine the delegate and the inside baseball stories as they start trading votes? Everyone's going to start wondering, wait a minute, he voted this way or she voted this way on the first ballot. They all of a sudden went this way on ballot 2. What happened? What quid pro quo went down here? We'll be going through this for months after the convention, and think about the narrative between the convention and the general election for Republicans. Everyone's going to be looking at who hijacked the race, who stole it from Trump, who did whatever, what were the deals they got for it. I mean, play this out a little bit. I'm not so sure, maybe Bill has, I'm not so sure some of the folks so willing to go down this have fully appreciated, A, how angry the Trump folks are going to be, and Cruz potentially, but certainly Trump if he doesn't walk away, and then B, the supporters and the journalists that are going to have a field day for this thing. This is like manna from heaven.
Well, you said this is going to last for months. It's not going to last for months. It's going to last for years. And if Trump, see, here's what's going to happen. I know Bill's talking politics of his party, but it's not going to start with the convention. Trump is going to scream bloody murder going back to Wisconsin and even before that, saying party leaders stole this from me effective this day. I was cruising along, talking as Trump, cruising along. I would have had the 1237, but they stacked the deck and stole this from me. And the party has a major problem. There's no getting around this, Richard. From sitting in Bethpage the other night, you mentioned we were there. These people, the party, it's wishful thinking if you believe, oh, well, it happened to Ronald Reagan and we're just going to, he didn't reach 1237. No, it's not going to go down like that. Trump is going to lead the charge. He's going to lead the revolt. It is not going to be good. It is not. The Democrats are going to be sitting back laughing. That's how bad it's going to be.
And there's two schools of thought, Andrew. One is hold your nose. Deal with Trump as much as he's going to kill you, but it's one election cycle. Worry about keeping the Senate seats, right? And just worry about keeping House and Senate after this cycle's over, and just run your own campaigns and don't run underneath the top line of the party. Then there's the possibility of a third party run by Trump. Now, it seems to me he hasn't organized anything to this point, and part of the ground game is he hasn't figured out all the different permutations like a Cruz might have, to be fair to him. How do you think it plays out?
It's interesting because party establishment, party leaders are going to be thinking about damage control. What hurts us the least? Whether we run Trump and we lose the White House, but do we run the risk of losing the House and the Senate? Or if we nominate Cruz, maybe we lose the White House, but we keep the House and we keep the Senate. But delegates, and particularly the delegates who are selected directly by or for the candidates, not like in New York where they're picked by the party, they're thinking positive. They're not thinking about damage control. They're thinking about getting our guy home and getting our guy the nomination. So you'll have that competing push-pull going on at the same time, too. And, a state like California where voters are picking the lever for the actual delegate with the name underneath that says Trump, and you assume that guy is going to be loyal or that woman's going to be loyal to Donald Trump, they're not thinking about limiting the damage to the party. They're thinking about getting our guy the nomination and getting through the whole thing. So I'm not sure that you're going to be able to get everybody on the same page to speak with one voice, to look out for the best interest of the party and the best interest of the candidates at the same time. I don't know how it's going to play out. I really don't.
Yeah, I think the one thing that the party hasn't done a good enough job in relaying is the message that these are the rules that everybody plays by. There were conversations started by the Trump people that if he comes close but doesn't make it, they got to give it to him, and that wasn't pushed back well enough as far as I'm concerned.
Bill, how much of this is complicated that if you flip-flop Cruz and Kasich's number, it'd be a lot more palatable and people would actually be running to Kasich in terms of organization. But because Cruz is by just a smidge despised almost as much as Trump, and in many corners the most hated man in Washington when he was there in Republican circles, that people can't stomach themselves to say, I'm going to do everything possibly I can to make sure he gets the nomination. How much of this is complicated because it's Cruz, it's option B, not somebody else?
I think for some people, Cruz is popular among conservatives, certainly. When you see Lindsey Graham saying nice things about Ted Cruz, that there's a big change out there, that they're willing to do it.
But in the same conversation, he said, my party's gone crazy. It was the same guy that he was ripping mercilessly less than a month earlier.
If it was a Rubio, it would have been easier. There's no question about it. I think Kasich has annoyed a lot of people by staying in, frankly, and so I think that's his problem there. But if it was a Rubio, I think it would have been a lot easier to close that argument and to move everybody behind one person.
Okay. We jump to a break. On the other side of it, tales from the campaign trail. We're going to take a look at how Sanders is going after Hillary, then how Hillary's husband, Bill, is taking on Black Lives Matter protesters who came after him. That and more after this.